Russia and the U.S. In an exchange, a prisoner swap, largest East-West prisoner swap since the Cold War.
Well, as usual, it was a win for Putin or any other country that deals with us. And we could have had him back. We should have had him back a long time ago. It should have never happened. It would have never happened. He shouldn't have been taken in the first place, and it would have never happened with us.
Trevor Reed was taken in the previous administration's time in office. Mr. Biden got him home. Paul Whelan was taken in the previous administration's time in office. President Biden got Paul home. And I would stress that $0 were exchanged in this deal, that the previous administration also conducted prisoner exchanges.
After President Biden and Vice President Harris negotiated a complex prisoner exchange, which saw the release of 4 Americans unlawfully detained by Russia, one of whom having been unlawfully detained by Russia since the Trump administration, Donald Trump has been in the throes of a public meltdown. And that meltdown continued during a recent interview on the Fox Propaganda Network, where he whined and lied about the fact that Joe Biden succeeded where he failed. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to talk about in this video. As we mentioned, President Biden and Vice President Harris, had an enormous success yesterday, which was really heartwarming. It saw the return of multiple Americans who'd been unlawfully detained by Russia. And again, yet again, President Biden succeeded where Donald Trump failed, because one of them, Paul Whelan, an ex-Marine, had been detained by Russia since the Trump administration. Donald Trump failed to get him back. Joe Biden succeeded. Donald Trump is not handling it well. We're going to play the clips and unpack it together.
Big news today. Russia and the U.S. In an exchange, a prisoner swap, largest East-West prisoner swap since the Cold War. What is your reaction that Russia freed the Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich and others?
Well, as usual, it was a win for Putin or any other country that deals with us. But we got somebody back, so I'm never going to be challenging that. It wouldn't have happened with us. We would have gotten him back. We wouldn't have had to pay anything. We wouldn't have had to let some of the great killers of the world go, because that's what's happened, as you know. And the deal's very complex because it just came out, so nobody understands the deal yet. And they make it complex, so you can't understand how bad the deal is for us. But we got him back. And we could have had him back. We should have had him back a long time ago. It should have never happened. It would have never happened. He shouldn't have been taken in the first place. And it would have never happened with us if I was president.
So it was more than prisoner swaps? It was something else?
I have no idea what they did. I just know they announced it.
We know you have no idea what they did. But again, just an endless garden hose of water hose of lies, right, coming from Donald Trump there. We should have never done it. It's a bad deal. It's a terrible deal. I don't know what it is exactly, but I know it's terrible. Just trust me on it. Should have never happened. It would have never happened if I'd been president. We'll get into all of that. But at first, I do want to do a quick fact check from John Kirby, one of the Biden administration spokespeople with respect to national security and diplomacy. He does a bit of a fact check on Donald Trump, and we'll get into other fact checks as well.
As for the previous comments by the previous president, Trevor Reed was taken in the previous administration's time in office. Mr. Biden got him home. Paul Whelan was taken in the previous administration's time in office. President Biden got Paul home. And I would stress that $0 were exchanged in this deal that brought these people home last night. It was all about people-to-people exchanges. And the last thing I'll say, Kate, is that the previous administration also conducted prisoner exchanges. The previous administration also had to make tough decisions to get Americans home. And I can't dispute Mr. Trump's number there, 59, but I just tell you, President Biden has gotten more than 70 Americans home. That's what you have to.
So again, great fact check by John Kirby. There were no dollars given to Russia, so Trump was lying about that. President Biden has gotten more hostages released than Donald Trump, according to Donald Trump's own numbers. And at least 2 of the people that President Biden has gotten back, Trevor Reed and Paul Whelan, were taken during the Trump administration. So when Donald Trump says it's not possible for someone to have been taken by Russia, it would have never happened on my watch. He's just objectively lying, and it's fun to point that out, and we should point that out, that again, it did happen on Trump's watch. He did fail. Biden has succeeded yet again where Trump has failed. But Trump, getting back to the interview with Fox, goes out of his way to complain about it again.
You said at the debate and the RNC, you said we You said at the debate and the RNC, you said, we want our hostages back and they better be back before I assume office or you will pay a very, very big price. What did you mean about a big price?
They know what I mean. But it looks like Biden's going to make a deal because he's giving away so much. I mean, we're putting out people that nobody thought would ever be released again. This deal that.
So again, he complains about the deal, but he doesn't know the terms of the deal. When asked about the terms of the deal, he says he doesn't know. Again, all he wants to do is complain. He's not happy about the fact that multiple Americans have been released, at least one of whom he failed to secure himself. You would think he would congratulate President Biden for succeeding yet again where he failed. But of course, he doesn't do that because he hates this country. He hates Americans because at the end of the day, he hates Joe Biden and the Democratic Party far more than any love he has for this country, which clearly isn't much. He would rather hurt Democrats than celebrate the successes of America when those successes of America are brought about by Democrats. Chris Murphy, Democratic senator, one of my favorites. He has been relentlessly fact-checking Donald Trump on this. We're going to play a couple of clips from Chris Murphy to this effect. So this is what he said, quote, "I gave the opposing country nothing," end quote. And then he fact-checks him. November 2019, 3 Taliban prisoners released in a swap under Trump. December 2020, 2 Iranian prisoners released in a swap. July 2020, another Iranian released in a swap. October 20th, 250 Houthi militants released in a swap for 2 Americans. He's a pathological liar. As other people on Twitter have pointed out, you want to look at a big one. Donald Trump arranged for the release of 5,000 imprisoned Taliban fighters as part of the disastrous Doha agreement that he inked directly with the Taliban as part of the withdrawal of Afghanistan. Donald Trump set that disastrous deal up. He failed to enforce the terms. He demanded things of the Taliban, but never actually enforced it. And then he gave the Taliban everything they asked for, including the release of 5,000 hardened Taliban criminals and fighters that went back to the Taliban and helped the Taliban sweep through Afghanistan and overthrow the Afghan government. Donald Trump arranged for that. So again, it's so important to point out that every time Donald Trump opens his mouth, if you were a gambling person, if you like to bet, you should probably bet that what Donald Trump is about to say is a lie. And he did. He absolutely lied about his record and what would and would not have happened under a Trump administration. Senator Chris Murphy, I want to play a couple of these clips in which he celebrates the success of the Biden-Harris administration in arranging for the release of these prisoners. And again, fact checks Trump.
I'm going to ask it of you because I think we can't get enough of understanding how a complex deal that involved 7 nations like this was achieved. I'm waiting for the movie version of this.
Yeah, this is an extraordinary diplomatic achievement, and it's a testament to what happens if you invest time in cultivating and building allies. This deal only works because Joe Biden, when he was sworn in, made it a mission to rebuild our alliance structure, primarily in Europe, but all around the world. Our relationship with Turkey has been very frosty over the years. Our relationship with Germany was fundamentally broken during the Trump administration, and today those countries are taking part in an extraordinary transfer of prisoners. And so you imagine that only Joe Biden could get this done. And you imagine what kind of deal Trump could have ever conceived. He talks a big game about, his ability to bring these prisoners home if he was president. But because he wouldn't have any relationships that he could trade on, because he couldn't ask the Germans or the Slovenians to help him, the only thing he would have to trade would be Ukraine, would be abandoning Ukraine as a gift to Putin in order to get these prisoners home. So this is what happens when you invest in alliances. It's a reason why they matter. It's a reason why those relationships ultimately come back to benefit the United States and save American lives.
So again, brilliant response by Chris Murphy with the fact check, pointing out that President Biden and Vice President Harris effectively rebuilt NATO and fortified relationships that Donald Trump allowed to decay during his administration, and that the strength of these relationships and the ability to leverage them, as you'll hear specifically with Chancellor Olaf, when Chris Murphy is in the other clip I'm about to play, but that Donald Trump wouldn't have the leverage. He wouldn't have the credibility to make these calls, to make these diplomatically costly call-ins and favors to our allies. I think that that's an important point worth making, and it's also instructive with respect to the upcoming election, since Donald Trump still campaigns on eroding NATO and weakening our allies and taking America back to like an early 20th century sense of isolationism, which, by the way, didn't work out for anybody. It's really stupid and barbaric. So I think that that's a distinction that's so worth making. It's also interesting that he points out that the only leverage Trump has when he talks a big game about he could get whatever he wants from Putin, the only leverage he has is undermining NATO and giving away Ukraine. And Donald Trump is the sort of person, I suppose, who would be perfectly willing to sacrifice our Ukrainian allies, as he's done with allies in the past, for the sake of short-term personal gain from a foreign autocrat. It's not outside the realm of possibility. Another clip from Chris Murphy responding to comments made by J.D. Vance that we talked about in a previous video yesterday, where J.D. Vance wants to give all the credit to Donald Trump.
We have to ask ourselves, why are they coming home? And I think it's because bad guys all over the world recognize Donald Trump's about to be back in office, so they're cleaning house. That's a good thing, and I think it's a testament to Donald Trump's strength.
Is that how you see it?
I mean, listen, since Kamala Harris was named the presumptive nominee, they've been flailing. I mean, I have no idea what JD is talking about. As I mentioned, Donald Trump consistently did these exact kind of deals. And had he been in a position to have to negotiate for the release of these Americans, he would have had no allies to lean on. The reason we got this deal done is because we had friends. Donald Trump couldn't have asked the German chancellor to release Krasikov. The phone would have been hung up before he even got the question out. The only leverage that Donald Trump would have if he gets elected is giving away Ukraine. Putin probably will be in a position to do some favors for Donald Trump, because Putin will ask in return for America to abandon Ukraine and Ukraine to be handed over to Russia, which would be cataclysmic for U.S. national security. So it's just not true that Trump was any better negotiator, and it is true that there's no way Donald Trump or J.D. Vance could have pulled off this agreement, because our allies will not pick up the phone when Donald Trump or J.D. Vance calls.
Love it. Love it. Decisive, fact-based, supported by the evidence. Just love it. And again, creates this enormous distinction between the Trump-Pence, Trump-Vance administrations, should there be a second Trump administration, and the Biden-Harris administration. And hopefully what will happen is is a Harris administration, right? So these contrasts are so important to make. And I think Chris Murphy does a really good job of articulating the critical differences here and, just absolutely torpedoing the bluster coming from Trump. That this would have never happened. And if it did happen, I would do it way better. This petulant ridiculousness. Because at the end of the day, he's not happy about this. He hates the fact that these 4 Americans are back on American soil because it's a win for President Biden and Vice President Harris. And he hates those two far more than he loves this country. And that's just simply a fact. Let me know what you think in the comments.